All right, everyone, welcome. On behalf of the National Catholic Educational Association, thank you for joining us for this professional development opportunity. I am Christy Blewett, NCEA's facilitator for today's webinar, Creating a Culture of Service Learning. Just a few housekeeping notes as our participants finish joining. Today's session will be recorded for archival purposes. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A window, where all questions will be monitored and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. At the conclusion of today's session, a link to the online survey will be shared in the chat box with instructions on how to receive a certificate of completion for this webinar. Today's webinar will be presented by Elizabeth Goldman. Liz works in the Office of Catholic Schools for the Diocese of Green Bay, Wisconsin, as the Associate Superintendent of Instruction and Academic Accountability. The oldest of 8 children, Liz has enjoyed the role of teacher since she was very young. She learned from her siblings, who did not always want to be bossed around, that it takes a lot of enthusiasm, patience, and humor to be a teacher. Liz is grateful to her parents who prioritize Catholic education for their family. Through her years as a Catholic school student, Liz was formed in loving environments with faith-filled teachers who modeled examples she has worked to emulate. Liz is passionate about the mission of Catholic schools. She feels it is important for teachers and administrators to recognize their work as a vocation from God. Part of that vocation is teaching students to be disciples of Christ. One way that Liz loves to encourage discipleship is through service learning, giving children the opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Liz Goldman, thank you so much for being with us here today. The floor is yours, or should I say the screen is yours.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here. Like Christy said in my bio, that this is a passion of mine. And one of the things I miss about being in the classroom is the opportunity to do service with students. And so I'm thrilled that I've had this opportunity at the convention and again today through this webinar to share this with our principals and teachers throughout the country. So as we do with everything in our schools and parishes, I'd like to begin with a prayer. I'm going to talk a little bit. Oops, can't see my slides. Let me go to this. Can you see them now? Okay, awesome. I am going to talk a little bit about Our Lady of Champion in a minute, but before we do, we'll begin with prayer. Our Lady of Champion is a very special devotion that we have here in the Diocese of Green Bay. And there is a part where you can silently add your intention, so I will pause for a moment when we get there. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O dear Lady of Champion, you revealed yourself as Queen of Heaven to your servant Adele. You gave her a mission to pray for the conversion of sinners, to bring the good news of Jesus Christ to others, and to prepare the children for the reception of the sacraments. I trust that as you called Adele to holiness, you are calling me, in my station in life, to live a holy life, devoted to Jesus Christ, with the help of your maternal love. I now bring before you my worries and anxieties. I abandon my attachments to them and place them at your feet. I ask that you hear the deepest longings of my hearts, and I pray most earnestly for your intentions. Dear Lady, you told Adele, and say to all of us, do not be afraid, I will help you. Help me now as I place this intention with complete confidence and trust in you. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Just a quick introduction. The picture on this page is my husband and our daughter. That was at her confirmation this past year. They are the most important people in my life and my biggest cheerleaders as I went through grad school and took a position as a principal and then stepped into the Office of Catholic Schools. So I like to credit them. but I also like to give credit to really the foundation of my own Catholic education. My parents were incredible. I'm the oldest of 8 children, and they made a lot of sacrifices for us to be able to be in Catholic schools. And the schools that I attended as a student, for elementary school, I was at St. Hubert in Chanhassen, Minnesota. High school was split between Holy Angels, Academy of Holy Angels in Richfield, and Notre Dame Academy in Green Bay. We moved in the middle of high school. I did my undergrad at St. Norbert College, and I did my graduate school at Marymount University in Arlington. And then during the years of my teaching, I taught at St. Matthew Elementary School in Green Bay, which is now Father Alloway, at St. Ambrose in Annandale, Virginia, St. Veronica in Chantilly, Virginia. Then I was in the Diocese of Madison at St. John the Baptist, and now currently in the Office of Catholic Schools. During this time, I was a teacher, mostly middle school. I was a resource teacher for a while, an assistant principal, and finally a principal. So I just love Catholic education. My entire adult life has been dedicated to this vocation, and I couldn't be happier. I know I wouldn't have the joy that I have serving in a public school. It's just not where my heart is. So I'm glad that God called me to this place and that He has allowed me to continue to do this work. So today, as we begin, I'm used to having a group that I'm talking to the whole time. This is very weird for me to be looking at a computer screen and not see any faces. So I'd like to have some interaction if possible. And I'd like to put out to you, what would you say are the benefits of offering service learning or service projects to students in your school? So if you could use the Q&A, I don't think the chat is enabled, but if you can use the Q&A and maybe drop a word or two about the benefits of service. So I see some coming in. Kids learn to love. Growing in empathy for other people, absolutely. It engages students with different learning styles. They're more aware of their community around them. It helps show kids, showing kids to put the Lord's will first, absolutely. Gives an experience of self-gift. Students become global citizens and understand more about their world. This is awesome. Discipleship, love of neighbors. Oh, you guys all get this. Allowing students to be involved in their community and helps them see the importance of it, helps them connect with their local community, helps to teach the students they're not the center of the universe, which as a middle school teacher, I can say, yes, that's often they're in that me phase. An opportunity for social and emotional growth, to learn responsibility. Servants lets others think outside of themselves to see others' needs. Yes, it's very important in our selfie culture. Service provides students the ability to live out what is being taught in the theology classroom. Absolutely. Students learn that they are not the only ones in the world and to think of others. Provides opportunities for them to become more Christ-centered than self-centered. When we learn to do it at a young age, we're more likely to continue through our lives. Yeah, we're going to talk about that when we talk a little bit about mandatory versus optional service. It helps our students achieve their true purpose of loving others and living out education. And kids learn servant leadership. These are all awesome answers, and certainly right on track. Some of the benefits of service learning that I talked about, or that I pulled up, developing critical thinking skills. When kids are in the classroom and they're doing a science project and they're trying to figure out, okay, this didn't go right, what's the next step? We see that kind of thing when we're doing service learning as well. What went well, what didn't go well? And when every time you have an opportunity for a service project, you always want to do a debriefing with the kids to find out, what did they learn and how are they going to use that going forward? So really, again, that's that active learning, the critical thinking, thinking about how they have done something and what they might correct or change the next time. Again, you said a lot of these things. It fosters multiple intelligence. It can build confidence, puts that focus on others instead of self. So we know that service learning is good. I think the next big question is, how do we do this? Our days are so filled with so many things that need to get done. My job in my office really focuses a lot on curriculum standards. So I understand that teachers and principals are looking at those and saying, okay, we've got to get this done in each of our classes. Where do we add something else in? And so I would like to propose that we become communities of service, and it just becomes the culture of what our schools are. And that is what I'd like to share with you today. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, Our Lady of Champion is a very special devotion to our diocese, all the state of Wisconsin, but our diocese. For those of you who are not familiar, Our Lady of Champion is an approved Marian apparition. It is the only approved Marian apparition in the United States, and it happens to not only be in the state of Wisconsin, but right here in our diocese of Green Bay. And we think it is incredibly special in the Office of Catholic Schools because Mary's message to Adele Bryce was really about the children. So Adele Bryce was a young Belgian immigrant. She grew up in her home country planning to become a sister with some of her very dear friends. They were all going to become sisters together. And when she was a young woman, her parents said, we're going to be moving to America. And she actually went to her priest and said, I don't think I can go. I need to become a sister. This is God's call for me. And he said, God's call for you first is to obey your parents, and you need to go. So the family traveled to Wisconsin and settled here. And Adele really still had that desire, but didn't know how to go forth and become a religious sister. And there was a Sunday when she was on her way to church, and a woman appeared to her, and she wasn't sure what it was, and if it was there wasn't a message at that point, but just this apparition. She talked to the priest, and the priest said, if you see her again, ask her who she is, who you are, and what do you want of me. And Mary proceeded to tell her that she was the Queen of Heaven, and that she wanted her to gather the children in this wild country and teach them what they should know for salvation, teach them their catechism, how to sign themselves with the sign of the cross, and how to approach the sacraments. That is what I wish you to do. Go and fear nothing. I will help you. So imagine our excitement in this diocese when we see that this message, the only approved Marian apparition in our nation, is right here, and the message is directed toward teaching children. And that is the vocation we're in. So we think this is really wonderful, really special. Our Bishop Ricken, just recently finished all the paperwork to send forth the I don't know what the official word is, but to put Adele Bryce up for canonization. So hopefully the next step is she will become a servant of God. But in the meantime, we have thousands and thousands of visitors who come to the shrine every year. It's in the middle of a farmland. There's some beautiful miracles that have taken place there. I can't do the whole talk on that, but I do recommend that you look up Our Lady of Champion and learn more about this wonderful message that's been given, not just to the teachers in Wisconsin, but teachers all around the world who are teaching children their faith. And so really the reason for this is because we truly are called. We are called to do these things. So then we talk about, okay, we're called to do this. How do we do this? Well, we do this by recognizing that we have a vocation as Catholic school teachers. I lived in the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia, and taught there and was a principal there. And when I lived there, I had moved out from Green Bay. I didn't know a soul, and I used to go on all these adventures. And one day I ended up in Emmitsburg. And if you haven't been there, make sure you find a time to go. It is where St. Elizabeth Ann Seton established her first school. And she really teaches us that, again, that we're here to educate the children in the faith. We're called to do this work. We are called to become the hands and feet of Jesus. And many of you have, especially if you're principals, have read the USCCB To Teach as Jesus Did message. And it talks about what we are supposed to be doing. And then Sister Patricia McCormick is one of my favorite people. She's at NCEA almost every year. If you haven't seen her yet, please make sure you do. I tease that I want to be her when I grow up, but she said something in one of her NCEA webinars last year about the fact that information is found everywhere and anywhere, but our responsibility is formation and to really form these children to be disciples. So again, that's what we're called to do. How do we do it? Well, we look to the saints. We look to the saints to find out what they have recommended, what they've done, and what they've recommended. And again, we could find so many quotes from saints that talk about service, but I did put a couple in the slide to share because I think they're just number one. Elizabeth Ann Seton and St. John Baptiste de La Salle were both educators working with children and teachers, but also just things that you can propose and share with your teachers and families as you really push this culture into your school. And I think St. Augustine just said it beautifully too. What does love look like? You know, someone said earlier that when you do service, you're teaching how to love. It's the hands to help others, the feet to hasten to the poor and needy. It's the eyes to see misery and want, the ears to hear the sighs and sorrows of men. That is what love looks like. And we are all called to be that. So hopefully you all feel inspired at this point to step out and start doing this. But now let's talk about the how we do this. Oh, sorry. No, I have one more thing. I forgot Mother Cabrini. If you haven't seen the movie Cabrini that came out, I loved it. It's not as Catholic as I would have made it, but I think I would argue that because it doesn't focus on all of the Catholic pieces, that more people who are not necessarily Catholic or even Christian will hopefully see it and accept the example from it because it's not too much in their face. But I share this every year. I do a new teacher orientation every year. And I share this with them because I want them to see that even, over 100 years ago, when she wrote this for her sisters who were going to be teaching children, these things are still applicable today. And I'd like you to just read through these statements. And then again, in the Q&A, just write down a couple things that you notice about these words. And just in case, I don't know how big your screens are. I think you probably have full screens, but just in case, I'll give you a minute to take a look at it. Christy, as these are coming in, can everyone see all the questions or can I just see them?
Yes, I do believe everyone can
Okay,
see them.
super.
Perhaps
Then I don't need to read them all. So hopefully you'll notice that these words really focus on how do we treat the child? How do we treat the soul? And how we reach them. There's not a lot that talks about what you need to do for reading comprehension or the steps you need to do for math. It's really about how to meet the needs of a child. Softness and learning, yes. We have to love these kids in our care. We have to see them as our responsibility. One of the other things I love about this is the first 8 of them are really focused on the child and the person. And there's only 2 things that really talk about you need to plan your work and keep your environment clean and well ordered. And while those are important things, we really know that the priority, it stands out very, very easily in this, that the priority is the children in our care. And part of our responsibility is to help get them to heaven. So it's really important for us to see, make the priority be the priority. And so again, this is just one other thing I like to share. So now we'll get into the hows. How do we do this? What does it look like? Well, I think it's important always to begin at home. And when I say home, I'm talking about our schools, our classrooms, the school as a whole, the parish community, that immediate group that we spend time with every day. And so think about, what does service look like in your classroom? Hopefully you and your students, you've modeled for your students what to do if someone's pencil case falls over and students automatically get up to help pick up. What does it look like in your school? Do you have people who do maybe bus patrol or morning drop off safety roles in the school? Do you have students who help serve lunch or help clean up after lunch? What are opportunities that these kids have that they can serve in your school? How do you model acts of service? It's so important for students to see their teachers and principals and administrators, anyone, office assistants, facilities people doing acts of service for others. And how do you acknowledge those acts of service? I think there are times, and I definitely, this was a flaw of my own in my early teaching, where I thought I shouldn't have to praise someone because they did the right thing. I shouldn't have to say, I would always say thank you, but I wouldn't don't have to make a show out of someone holding the door open for me, because that's what that child should do. But I came to realize that acknowledging those acts of service really does help other students learn what to do as well, what the expectation might be, what the extra step might be. So as a teacher in your classroom, how are you acknowledging when a student goes over and helps another student who's struggling with their homework? Are you sending messages home to parents to say, there was a kid, on the playground today who was really sad, and your son went over to make sure he had someone to play with? Are you recognizing other teachers, other coworkers for the little things that they do for you that they may just do because that's who they are? But are you recognizing those things in your peers, in your students, in the parents of your students? Are you on a regular basis saying, go home tonight and thank your parents for supporting you so you can do this work at school, and for providing you a Catholic education? Really look at ways that you can practice and model gratitude so that it becomes something that children desire to do. And again, we don't want it to be that in the beginning, it's going to be, in some cases, that the kids desire it because they want that attention, because they want that praise. And that, while ultimately that isn't what we want them to, the reason we want them to do this service, it is going to get them into a mode where it's going to feel good to do those things. And eventually they're not going to need that praise. They're not going to desire that praise or look for that praise. They're just going to do it because they know it's the right thing to do and it makes them feel good. So I hope that, as you're bringing this into your classroom, it really just becomes a natural step in that next phase of, how do we be servants to one another, just like Jesus calls us to be. In teaching these things, there's so many gifts that the church gives us that allows us to teach these things. And three that I really like to talk about with my students, like I said, I was a middle school teacher for most of my teaching career. And so I did a lot of stuff with teaching. I was English and literature and religion. I did a lot of cross-curricular activities, and we really looked at the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, the 7 social teachings of the Catholic Church, and then just examples, biblical examples. So what I want to spend time with you on today is just talking about how we can use these guidelines that our faith gives us and share that with our community. And again, not just our students in the classroom, but hopefully the whole school and the parents. And if you're putting stuff in your bulletin, sharing it with parishioners and the community at large. So we have the corporal and the spiritual works of mercy that really tell us what we should be doing, how we can be the hands and feet of Jesus. Oftentimes schools will do a food drive, and then that takes care of the feed the hungry or give the drink to the thirsty. Maybe there's even a clothing drive or a diaper drive or just different things. And those are all wonderful. But very often what happens is child goes home and says, I need to bring in some food. And maybe they go to the pantry, maybe they go to the store and pick some stuff up, but they bring it in and mom and dad pay for it, and it's given. That's wonderful. It's beautiful. But how do we take that a step further? How do we make this relevant to the kids? Well, first of all, encouraging families to have the child do some chores to make money and have them go shopping with you to choose these things. And then as they're choosing things, think, what would I want to have in my home? Not just, what is yes, we want to give the basic needs for people who are hungry and thirsty or to make sure we're nourishing them, but also thinking about, I want to give them the same kind of quality that I would give myself. Another thing that I would encourage is to have the students involved in as much of the collection as possible. You can have kindergartners and first graders help pack the boxes with their seventh and eighth grade buddies and talk about it. Can be a math lesson that you take the cereal boxes and you say, okay, how will these fit into a box? You can talk about weight distribution and talk about how you don't want to have too many cans because then it's going to be too heavy. And there's so many different activities. You get again, even with the little ones, you get the oatmeal containers and talk about the fact that this is a cylinder, so it's going to fit differently, or cans too are cylinders, and they're going to fit differently than your cereal box or a box of rice or whatever the case might be. So really take opportunities for them to not just drop off a bag of food, but really be a part of how does this get distributed. Many times local food pantries will let middle school students in during the day when they do not have people coming in to pick up food. So talk to your local food pantries and see if that would be an option. Have your students get a tour of what the pantry looks like and learn the process of what it looks like to go and pick up food. Have them learn and ask questions about, is this how do you recognize the dignity of a person when they are humbling themselves and coming in and asking for something? And how do then we as students recognize that this isn't about me doing something good and giving, this is about me providing for someone's needs, their very basic needs. um, Giving shelter to the homeless, finding the opportunity for, if you have a local homeless shelter or if you have homeless in your community, making little sandwich bags and, putting crackers and a bottle of water and maybe an apple or a piece of fruit and dropping those off places where you can, again, just talking to them about those opportunities. Um, Visiting the sick and imprisoned can be a little bit more difficult, especially since COVID. We're more aware of having people in and protecting both the person who's sick, but also protecting the healthy from getting sick. But there are certainly opportunities where children could write letters. We've had students make fleece blankets that are delivered to the pediatric unit in the children's hospital. We've even had students who have ended up in the hospital and come back and say, "Oh, Mrs. Goldman, I got a blanket today. It's not the one our school made, but someone else made this." And that's just a really special way for them to see what it's like to be on the receiving end of this. Not that we want our children in there, but visiting the imprisoned, it can be people who are in prison incarcerated, but it could also be people who are imprisoned because they can't leave their home for some reason, or they just don't, they emotional. We have so many people dealing with mental health issues. How are they emotionally imprisoned, and what could we do to potentially help them? Maybe it's caroling, maybe it's writing letters. One of the beautiful things that many of our Catholic schools have is a cemetery attached to it. We're parish schools in most cases. And years ago, when I was teaching, one of our first grade teachers every year during the month of November would go out and go to the cemetery, and they would pray the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, and they would pray for all the souls who had died and who had been buried there. And over time, they started to notice, like, oh, there's a little bird poop on this headstone. What should we do? And so then they started going with wet wipes and wiping off headstones. And little, 6-year-olds are thoughtful enough to think, how can I make this a special place? How can I make this a beautiful place? What can I do for the people who are coming to bury their loved ones, or who are coming to visit their loved ones, and really make them know that this person is special, and we see what needs to be done here. So I think those are just a few examples of things that you can do with those corporal works of mercy. The spiritual works of mercy, you have to be a little bit careful with kids. If you tell a 10 or 11-year-old to instruct the ignorant, they're not always going to do that with the same tact that you may, or admonish the sinner. So I really focus on how we can bear wrongs patiently and forgive others and comfort the afflicted and pray for the living and the dead. I think that those first three are certainly things we can teach our children, but they're a little bit more difficult and take a little bit more time and understanding as their brains develop. But really, we can start thinking from a very young age about how we deal with others when it's needed. So I'm going to pause there for just a second. I gave you some ideas. Do you have any other thoughts or questions that you'd like to put out there specific to the, oops, let me go back, the corporal and spiritual works of mercy? And I won't wait long because I'm just so used to being in front of people. It's weird not to have this interactive conversation. Okay, we will keep moving forward. Another thing that I like to do, and this was introduced when I was a teacher, our principal decided that throughout the months of the year, the school year, we would focus on a different one of our Catholic social teachings every month. September is a busy month, so we skipped September. We started in October and went through May. And each month had a different social teaching that we focused on. That gave me the opportunity as a middle school religion teacher to really dive into those social teachings with my students. And so we were able to take each one and we created, I created documents that had Bible references, and they created possible service projects. And when we did this, we said, if you had unlimited resources, what would you do? You know, so they really created some very big service projects. We couldn't do them all, but we were able to do some of them. And it was really cool for the students to see how they could make a difference. And the more you empower these kids to feel that, the more successful they'll be. I often say, especially once I was a principal and seeing all age groups from 4 to 14, you are never too young to make a difference. Everybody can do something. And again, each one of these things was a way that we could reinforce that. So I'm going to talk specifically about some different things with the 7 social teachings in a little bit, and I'll get to some more slides on that. But just very briefly, those teachings are the life and dignity of the human person, which really encapsulates everything that we talk about in the social teachings and really in our Catholic faith, is recognizing that every person is a child of God. Every person was created by God, and every person is unique and special and beautiful because of that, and deserving of dignity. Call to family, community, and participation, rights and responsibilities, option for the poor and vulnerable, the dignity of work and right of workers, solidarity, and care for God's creation. So you could take these and do one a month. You could, if you really want to spread this out, you could focus on one a semester or one a year and take several years to get through all the social teachings. What I would encourage schools to do is not only use this in the classroom and in your school as a whole, share it in your newsletter, put messages in your parish bulletin. Make sure that this is getting out to people, not because you're looking for the accolades of, oh my goodness, this school is so amazing. Like, yes, that's very nice to hear, but because it's an invitation to others to step in and do something the same. If they see that 4K and kindergarten students were able to tie fleece blankets, because even a 4-year-old can tie a knot, and they see pictures of those blankets going to church and your pastor blessing them after one of the school masses, and they see the joy on the students' faces and the pride of humble pride of knowing that they were part of that, then maybe they call the school and say, you know what, next time you do one of those, I'd like to donate some of the fleece. Or could you tell me where you did that? I'm going to make a blanket with my family and we'd like to make a donation to that hospital as well. Again, it's not for anything self-serving. It is for making this a bigger thing, for that ripple effect that can grow beyond your classroom, your school, and your community. I'm probably not telling you things that you don't already know, but I think that, again, these are hopefully, a couple of ideas that maybe you can embrace 1 or 2 during the course of the year and move forward that way. Another thing that I really think is important is to talk about our biblical examples. When you see a student who stops, maybe there is some garbage on the ground and three people walk past it and the fourth person stops and picks it up and throws it away. That's a good Samaritan act, isn't it? That's something that other people looked down and saw that garbage on the ground, but for one reason or another, they didn't pick it up. And then someone recognized that, you know what, if I don't pick this up, someone else is going to have to. And I'm just going to do it. I think, when you're looking, when you see these biblical examples, don't just bring it up when you're teaching that Bible verse in your religion class. Bring it up when you see examples of it. We see Mary Magdalene washing the feet of Jesus. And Martha and Mary is another great story. Jesus is an incredible example when he washes the disciples' feet and says, I want you to go forward like me and do this. I think David and Goliath is another good one, that no matter how little you are, again, like I said earlier, no matter how little you are, you can make a difference. Certainly, I don't think anybody that day envisioned a young child or adolescent coming forward and conquering Goliath. But because he was empowered by God, truly, a miracle happened that day. So really focus on different ways that you can use what we've been gifted with in our Bible, in the catechism, through church teaching, that we can use as examples and share with our students. So some of the things that I think are important is, again, if you're principals and you're going to propose this to your teachers, or if you're teachers and you're going to propose this to your principals, and they say, oh, this sounds great, but you know what? We don't have time to do this because we have to do this and we have to do this. And there's an initiative that just came out from the diocese that everyone has to do. And I know I'm that office that puts those out there, but there's good reason for this. And so here's some arguments that you can say, well, this is really, these are cross-curricular activities. These are ways that I can check off my standards in my lesson plans and do something for others. So again, we want that service to start at home. We want that service to be internally in your classroom, in the school, in the parish, but then we also need to look at how do we do this beyond our home. Many schools recognize baptisms and they will send cards to children when they're baptized. A great marketing opportunity is to continue to send a birthday card each year. And then when they're 3, if you have a 3-year-old program, or 4, right before they turn 4, welcome them to your school. Come for a tour. We'd love to see you, and welcome you into our school. We can do something similar with deaths in the parish. If you had a class like who every time there was a death in your parish, they made cards, and they can make all the cards at the beginning of the year very general, but just that say the students of St. John Catholic School are praying for you. We are so sorry for your loss. And those cards go out to parishioners when they've lost a loved one. It's a small connection, but again, it's a way for you to connect to the students empathy and condolences, and how we reach out to others and pray for others in their time of need. English language arts, anytime you do cards or letters, there's so many different people you can do it for. Your religious, first responders, parents, parishioners, seminarians, anyone that you can connect to. It's a good opportunity for, how do you write a letter? How do you ask or answer questions? How do you build a relationship? How do you share your information safely? Different ways that you can teach, but also be doing a work of service. Teaching the history of labor laws, especially as children get older. Again, as a middle school teacher, we would read a trade book that maybe had something to do with it. We read one about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, and it really looked at perspectives of what it was to be working in these difficult positions, unsafe positions, in the early 1900s. And so we talk about that, but then we say, you know what, there are still children around the world who are working in unsafe positions in places where they shouldn't be working, or there may be adults who are working in places that are not safe, or they're not given the dignity that they should get because they are a child of God. How does that make you feel? What can we talk about with that? Going along with that too, teaching about fair trade. When we're buying things, are the people who are making this making fair money, but just wages based on what they're doing? Or is this something that is not ethically what we'd want it to be. In science, we can certainly do a lot of environmental awareness. That Care for God's Creation falls beautifully into science classes, and it gives us an opportunity to be able to share what's going on in our world, and focus on things. And it's so, again, you can take your kindergarten class to the cemetery or to a park to clean up trash, and they think it's the coolest thing in the world. They're if that was their chore that they had to do every day, they may not embrace it like that. But if it's getting them out of school for a mini field trip, it can be a really fun thing to do. One of the things that one of our schools did several years ago, a parent actually came to me and said, we'd like to sponsor, through a grant that they had received, a service project, and we'd like to help you get this rolling so that it can be done on a yearly thing. So during Lent, we would put a well out in our office space, just a little wooden well, and kids could bring in their coins each day. But we said, that's great. We want them to know that it's doing that. But how do we take this a step further? So the parents had pictures printed of people all over the world who didn't have safe drinking water. And we would put that above our drinking fountains. We put that above our bathroom sinks to remind students to be, aware of how much water they're using. Are they being wasteful? Um, and then on top of that, we said, well, you know what? Let's have them really see what would it look like and feel like to carry water. And so we got a variety of buckets. Our biggest kids, our middle school students, actually had 5-gallon buckets that they carried. We went outside. So it was a little bit messy, but it was a lot of fun and well worth it. Our youngest kid had little, pails like for the sand, and we carried water outside. And it was an opportunity for the big and little kids to work together, but to really see what was it like to be outside in the heat, to be walking all around the outside of the school and the playground to carry this water, and having to do that every day, sometimes multiple times a day, for all of your water needs. And again, it just helps build empathy. They without us, asking, what was this? My hands hurt. I'm getting, blisters or whatever. And we didn't make them do it for a long time. It was not, I promise it was a safe thing to do, but they really do feel it. They understand what's happening. So, again, you can bring these things into your school without a lot of cost to you, and but with great benefit to the students, the children in your community, and to others. I think one of the things that makes this very worthwhile is to have it student driven whenever possible. If you're at a K-8 school, or preschool through 8th grade school, you have a wonderful opportunity to have these leaders, these true leaders in your building. When I was a middle school teacher and when I was a principal, that is a time where you lose students, because if students are not going to be going to the Catholic high school, or if they are just really into other things that they can't get at your school, they start to look elsewhere, right? They start to say, well, if I go to the public middle school, there are more sports opportunities. If I go to the public middle school, I can do orchestra, or I can do shop class, or whatever the case might be. And we have to recognize that we're different. We cannot always offer those same things that the public schools can. But there are things that we can offer that the public schools cannot. And one of them is opportunity for leadership. So we decided, like many schools do, to have our house groups. The houses were divided up amongst the schools, so they had students from every single grade level in each group. They were named after a saint. We always said that the 8th graders were like the parents of those groups, and the 7th graders were like the oldest child, to help out. And I worked with our teachers to really say, you are there as teachers. We always had teachers in every group. You are there to advise as needed, but really these groups should be facilitated and led by our middle school team. Now, that also takes time practicing with your middle school team and talking about, what does it look like if someone doesn't want to participate? How do you get them involved? How do you make sure that everybody has a chance to learn and someone's not trying to take over the conversation? And then all of a sudden you have these students who talk all through your class who are saying, Mrs. Goldman, I don't like it when people interrupt me when I'm trying to tell them what to do. And they're learning also how to be good students. So that's another benefit. But we have these middle school teams that plan the service projects and that execute the service projects. You also want to make sure, in addition to being student driven, you want this stuff to be student centered. You want it to be things that students can do with minimal help. Again, a food drive is a wonderful thing. And I know our pantries are so grateful when our schools have food drives and they can help fill their shelves for the people in need. But let's do something that can also be geared to the students. So again, counting, um, putting things in boxes, determining what, if you're splitting it up for a family, what would a family need? If we put all the cans in one box, then that family may get a lot of soup, but they're not getting the peanut butter. So how do we divide this up and make sure that it's equitable for people? Um, I always include prayer before an activity, and at the end of it, we pray for the people who are going to be receiving the service that we've given. And I think that every service project has to have a debrief with students. That debrief is going to look different with kindergartners than it does with seventh and eighth graders. But if you do something and then you just let it go until the next service project, you are missing an opportunity for one of the most important things, which is understanding why we do what we do, and kind of how we take the gifts that we have and we share them with others. So take that time and encourage your teams to take that time to debrief with the students. And then often you're going to have to, as adults, debrief too and say what went well, what didn't go well, how do we need to do this differently next time? Because if things aren't successful, it's going to be easy to say, yep, this doesn't work in our school, and walk away from it. So always look for what could we do differently? What could we do better? There are times when you're going to have to say, we're doing too much and this doesn't work. If you don't already, every school should be looking at what do we keep? What do we get rid of? And what do we, what do we add? What do we subtract? And what do we keep? um, because you can't do everything. You have to be willing to set some things aside. And so those debriefing opportunities are really important. And then again, sharing your stories with others. We are called to be humble. We are called to be kind and generous out of our own generosity, not because we're getting credit for it, but there are still ways that you can share this information with others, whether it would be in your parent newsletter, in the bulletin, sometimes even having a news crew come, where you can share it because you're encouraging others to do something the same, where you're showing a positive example of how this worked and what you can do, what someone else could do in their school to make this a good experience for them. So my last few slides focus specifically on the 7 social teachings of the Catholic Church. I'm not going to read everything on them. My slides are available to everyone, and my contact information will be there on the end. So I'm happy to share any of that information. But we do have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go over just some examples of things that you could do. And hopefully you have lots of other ideas, and I would love it if you would share them with me so I can keep adding to my presentations as I talk to others. But life and dignity of the human person, again, this is probably the easiest one to address because it's the one we are called to do for everybody. Each time I work with one of the social teachings, I pick a saint. I just think those saintly connections are so important. We certainly learned so much from the life of Jesus, and that is amazing. And Jesus was both human and divine, but I think there's something really special about learning from the lives of the saints because we are not Jesus and they are not either. And they say every saint has a past, every sinner has a future, and so we can see these people who were born like us and how they lived their lives so beautifully that they are recognized as a saint in heaven. So again, just making those connections, I think, is really beautiful and important. A lot of people do things for pro-life ministries, for food drives and homeless shelters and things like that. One year we decided to do a kindness revolution. We said that kindness begins at home. And so we were really working on social emotional learning initiatives. That year we happened to be bringing on the Frenzy curriculum at our school. We were one of the early schools who started with Frenzy, just loved them. And it was a great way to each month have something connected to that social emotional learning initiative. But then we were also doing kind of an anti-bullying, and I probably would even rephrase that now to be more a proactive friend. And really making sure that people didn't feel left out, that everybody felt included, and everyone's voices were heard. So that's certainly something you can do. The way we did it, we hosted a pep rally. Everybody got bracelets that I don't remember if they said kindness matters or kindness counts, but something that they could wear throughout the year. That was kind of the reminder. And then we had bulletin boards all around the school. We had speakers who came in to talk to them, to the students, about kindness. That was really our focus for the whole year. And our spiritual theme that year was we are on a mission of love. And we really focused on how do we become missionaries of love? How do we spread that around our school and our community and our homes? Call to family, community, and participation. There's so many ways that we can do this. And again, I put multiple here, but one of my favorite ways was doing a parent mass. So our school, and as I'm sure many or all of yours do, have a weekly student mass. And during the year, it's planned by different classes, and the students read and participate in different ways. Well, we decided that we wanted to do a mass where the parents were the participants. And so each year in the fall, we had a parent mass, and the parents came in and they were readers and greeters, and they were the choir, and they were the altar servers. And the students all sat in their seats for that mass because none of the classes were involved in being part of the mass that day. And they were so excited to see their parents doing these things. And I had some parents who came in the beginning and said, "Oh my gosh, I don't think I could read in front of everyone." But then my daughter said, "Mom, I'm in second grade and I read petitions at Mass. And if I can do it, you can do it." And they stepped up and did it. And it was just so beautiful. And it became an annual tradition where that was really looked forward to both by the students and the parents. And from that, there were some parents who decided they would read at Mass. There were some families who decided that as a family they would cantor, or the father and the child, or mother and child, would be altar servers together at a Sunday Mass on the weekend. So it was a really good way to kind of build community, not just with the school, but extend it to the parish as well. Rights and responsibilities. Now, I was a history teacher, so I like this kind of stuff, but it can be a little bit more technical and not quite as exciting. But certainly when you're doing classroom rules at the start of the year, that's a really good time to talk about what does it look like to make just responsible rules for people. When you're at recess and you're talking about there's a difference between a sport and a game. When you play football, in your league, you have different equipment, you have coaches, you have referees. When you play football at lunch recess, it's different. So you can't tackle, you can't, you know, whatever the case might be. It's different. It's a different structure. And so it's helping students understand that there are certain circumstances where there's one set of rules. There's another set of circumstances where there's another set of rules. And this is how things work. This is how our society works. Um, there's some really great, and I hope that link still works, but if it doesn't, Google Catholic Relief Service. They have a great lesson plan about water, and it really talks about, like, again, our rights to clean water and the responsibility we have for it. Option for the poor and vulnerable. Again, this comes back to our clothing drives, our blanket making opportunities, our working with the elderly. Sometimes this is about disability awareness as well. And again, as teachers in the classroom, we've all said that hopefully every child gets what he or she needs, and that might be different. And sometimes when explaining that to students, that can be difficult. And this is an opportunity for us to say, we wouldn't make everyone wear glasses with the same prescription, because some of you will not see if you have my glasses on. Many of you won't. And how everybody gets what they need, because it's that vulnerability piece. They oftentimes, children see the poor, but they don't necessarily understand the vulnerable. So that is a way that you can share that with them. Dignity of work and right of workers, kind of like laws and rights and responsibilities. It's not quite as exciting to do, but it's a great way to recognize people in your community. When I was in college, one of my professors said the first two people you go introduce yourself at your first school is your secretary and your maintenance person. And it's true. And oftentimes those two positions aren't as recognized as some of the other people in our buildings. But how could we go about teaching our children that our facilities and maintenance personnel are just as valuable and important as the principal, this is a way that we can say, and again, picking up that garbage in the hallway, let's do this so Mr. Todd doesn't have to. There are lots of great ways that you can encourage these positive actions. And again, it directly relates to the dignity of work and the right of workers. Solidarity is another one that we talk about. Empathy, empathy, empathy. I talk to my students about empathy is like a muscle, and you have to practice it for it to really grow in you. And so really understanding, how would I feel if I was in this situation? How would I feel if my grandpa died? And what can I do for my friend to make them feel better? How would I feel if one of the first responders in our community, if they didn't have what they needed at the firehouse? How would I feel if then there was a fire and they couldn't get to me for some reason? Any different example you can think of. Sophia Institute has some great social teaching connections, and I think their one specifically on solidarity is very good. So check that out if you can. And then the last of the, wrong way. Last of the social teachings is care for God's creation. A lot of times children, if you bring something with animals, they just love it. But again, keeping it simple in your classroom, don't throw that into the garbage, throw it into the recycling because it's less at the landfill. And talking about ways that you can do that. I've seen a lot of schools lately who have community gardens or planting gardens, and they're even using those things in their school lunch program. So there's a lot of great ways that you can encourage this every single day throughout the year, and then build it into a couple of big service projects during the course of the year. Okay, I did a lot of talking. I would have loved to have seen you all in person. Again, I welcome comments and questions and just the opportunity to continue to connect. There have been times when I will do a presentation similar to this with a whole team of teachers. So if you have a school that you'd like to present this to, let me know. Otherwise, if you just want to talk about it and could make connections, please feel free to reach out. You're all welcome to use this slideshow and contact me at the email address or phone number that's there. So I thank you so much for being here today.
Wow, Liz, thank you. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all here today that you just exude joy and joy about service. No less.
Thank you. Thank you.
The inspiration for us to go forth and be the hands and feet of Jesus in the world, forming human dignity in our students, in our schools, our churches, our communities. And you're just such a wealth of creative ways to incorporate this across the curriculum.
It's the Holy Spirit and the many amazing people I've worked with through the years.
It's a beautiful, faith-filled mission. So God bless you.
Thank
You
you.
for giving of your time, your talents with us today, and the important work that you do. And we'll keep an eye on that Q&A box in case there are questions that might roll in here. And just while I finish with some housekeeping notes, thank you to our participants for attending this NCEA Summer 2024 webinar series. NCEA continuously strives to improve the quality of our services for our members based on your feedback. So please help us make an even bigger difference by using the link I will put in the chat to complete this survey. Let's see, this is for everyone, and that should be popping up in your chat here shortly. And here we go. By the way, if you're interested in a certificate of attendance, please include your email address at the end of the survey. All certificates are sent via automated email, so check your spam folder if you don't see an email within a few moments. And I'll just check one more time, see if we have anything except thank yous and wonderful, excellent points. Thank you. Rave reviews for you here, Liz, today.
Thank you.
Really great.
Thank you for the opportunity. I love sharing it.
And I hope you get a lot of people hitting you up for more presentations. That's where it's really important. So
Thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of NCEA, thank you for the opportunity to serve you. Thank you to Liz, our fabulous presenter today. Goodbye and God bless you.